Hello, BookTube. I've got basically a tale of two books for you here today. Two recent arrivals here at Hyde Cottage. One old, one new. I thought we'd go through both of them and just talk about them a bit. It's just a formless video for me to chat about books with my imaginary BookTube friends. We'll do the old book first. It might seem on the surface as though it is a flagrant violation of rule number one. The sender even describes it that way in the little note attached. I don't know if I'm willing to say that. I think I might be willing to give this a pass. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'm being too lenient. Of course, for those of you who are new to the channel, rule number one on this channel is don't send me a book. Okay? No matter how much you might think I want it, no matter how much you want me to have it, no matter how much you can see how much I love books, don't send me a book. I know what I want. And I want what I know I want, and I will find it on my own. There's no chance, virtually none, that you will be shopping at your local Oxfam or your, Goodwill or your local used bookstore and find something and think, oh, I bet Steve both doesn't have that and does want that, and be right. There are about 2 people in the world who can do that and be right. Usually it is a complete shot in the dark and a bad idea because you're going to have to spend money on the book and then money on the postage for something that has a 99% chance of failing. That's why I instituted rule number one, because this is a weird parasocial relationship, and if the thing that I want you to send me is the thing that you don't send me, which is your old tech, the tech that you don't love, that iPad that you don't use anymore. I want it. That MacBook or Chromebook that you don't use anymore. I want it. For all I know, it might be the machine of my dreams, the one device to rule them all. But maybe there's an exception that can be made when, in the course of a video, I actually say, here's a specific book that I do not have and that I want. I don't really like making an exception along those lines because that seems like it's setting a time clock, a starter clock. Well, because I'm going to see far more books in the course of a week than you are. It stands to reason that I'm going to have a much greater chance of finding that book than you are much sooner than you do. Nevertheless, it does open a kind of door. We were doing a upcoming books in 2023 video the other day, and I mentioned that John Grisham is returning to the character of Mitch McDear from The Firm and chronicling his subsequent adventures. Now, I raised a little bit of a concern at the time because Mitch McDear doesn't really have much of a character. He's not supposed to. That's not what he appears originally in The Firm, and he's not supposed to have a character in The Firm, except that he wants to do the right thing. Whereas all the people before him in his situation either did not do the right thing or did the right thing and ended up dead. He wants to do the right thing, but that's not much of a character. And also, the book ends with very much happily ever after. It does not. The book ends with no hint of further adventures to come from this character. No, this character has had his adventure. That's the story that you just read. But I mentioned in that video when I was talking about that sequel, which is coming out later this year, that I don't have a copy of The Firm, where Mitch McDear makes his appearance, his original story, and that I haven't had one in years. And that I don't want just any one. I want a copy of The Firm in hardcover with the classic green dust jacket. And one of you went out and got me a copy. Now, the guilty person here emailed me and said, I found a copy, I'll send it. And that was that. There was no door left open for me to say, oh no, you don't. I found a copy, I'll send it. And I thought, when I first read that message, I thought, well, okay, that means you found a used copy or at a library sale or something like that. But I don't think that's what happened. I think this person went on the Amazon Marketplace and bought a perfect condition secondhand copy of The Firm. And they sent it to me. This is the thing I'm talking about. This is John Grisham's The Firm. And it is not a later reprint because it says also by John Grisham, A Time to Kill. There's not a list of 40 books there. There's just this thing. Kind of amazing. And there's a note in it from the original sender, and I got it. I was abashed and very, very happy. I don't know that I remember how to find who told me they were sending this. If you're watching, I got it, and I'm very, very grateful. This came out in 1990, something like 1991, something like that, and was a gigantic hit. Just gigantic. Long before the movie. And then the Tom Cruise movie came out, and this thing took off even more because the movie was a really smart, really sharp adaptation of the book. And the book is a story about a young lawyer named Mitch McDear who is hired by a very reclusive firm. And he starts to notice weird things about them right away, but he's thinking, I'm brand new to this world, so this might not be as weird as they seem. I don't have much to compare it to. But it seems to him that some odd things are going on at this firm. And the more he snoops around, the more he realizes that the firm has a lot of dead ex-employees. There are a lot of people who seem to have left the firm in a pine box. And a lot, not one or two for actuarial table reasons, but a lot of them. And I don't want to spoil the book. When I got the book, I thought, well, okay, that firm's sequel is coming out a couple of months from now, so I'll put this on the list and make sure that I get to it before then, and I didn't. I sat down right away and read the whole thing. I reread the whole thing for the first time in, 30 years. I read this when it was a phenom, and then I read it again, just in one huge gulp. And a number of things to say about it. I don't want to spoil it for any of you who haven't read The Firm or seen the movie. I strongly recommend doing both. Like I mentioned in that forthcoming books video, Grisham can write a bad book, very much so. A lot of his books are bad. And I think it's kind of reassuring that even his diehard fans know that, which is why some of his books are immensely more popular than others, right? I mean, even a Grisham fan is not going to be able to tell me anything at all about the make-weight, boring, C-effort book that came before Playing for Pizza, and the make-weight, C-list effort book that came right after Playing for Pizza. But Playing for Pizza, there isn't a John Grisham fan in the world that doesn't recognize that as an extremely good John Grisham book. Same thing is true with this. I don't think I would have many dissenting voices from that. This is politically incorrect, at least in terms of 2023, which it couldn't help but be. But boy, oh boy, does it have... The phrase that kept coming up when I was rereading it was a young man's energy. It's leaner than subsequent Grisham. There's a lot more muscle on the bone of every paragraph, every sentence. Everything is showing that it wants to be there. It really made me believe what I assumed were apocryphal stories about Grisham writing this thing piecemeal on yellow legal pads on his commute to and from work. It really made me believe that, because it really feels like a fire in the belly kind of novel in a way that I did not remember. Of course, I wouldn't have remembered it, right? Because I would have had nothing to compare it to. Now that I know what this author can write like when he's a bloated old success, a multimillionaire, now that I know what that's like, what that can be like, I now have something to compare it to. And this is terrific. Absolutely terrific. The very opening paragraph announces the fact that you could not write this today and probably couldn't reprint it today if it didn't have multi-millions of dollars behind it. Just listen to this opening paragraph. It's terrific, but it's going to set, it's going to get sensitivity readers wondering, oh, is there a fresh kill here? Is the smell of pee that I smell? The senior partner studied the resume for the 100th time and again found nothing he disliked about Mitchell Y. McDear. At least not on paper. He had the brains, the ambition, the good looks, and he was hungry. With his background, he had to be. He was married, and that was mandatory. The firm never hired an unmarried lawyer, and it frowned heavily on divorce, as well as on womanizing and drinking. Drug testing was in the contract. Now, notice what Grisham was doing right away there. Because on the surface, you're thinking, oh, okay, so a fine, morally upstanding firm. You prefer married people, no drinking, no womanizing. But it has a creepy undertone to it, right? That all the people in the firm have to be married. That has a creepy undertone to it. It just gets worse. He had a degree in accounting, passed the CPA exam the first time he took it, and wanted to be a tax lawyer, which of course was a requirement with a tax firm. He was white, and the firm had never hired a black. They managed this by being secretive and clubbish and never soliciting job applications. Other firms solicited and hired blacks. The firm recruited and remained lily white. Now, see, that I think is fairly obvious that Grisham is condemning this. He's mocking it and condemning it. But we're talking now just about purely Soviet-style, truth reconciliation panels. We're talking just about simple words that you can't use. You are not allowed anymore to use black as a noun for people, for a person. There would have to be an adjective. But anyway, let's see here. We'll just go to the end of the paragraph. Plus, the firm was in Memphis, of all places, and the top blacks wanted New York or Washington or Chicago. McDear was a male, and there were no women in the firm. That mistake had been made in the mid-'70s when they recruited the #1 grad from Harvard, who happened to be a she and a wizard at taxation. She lasted 4 turbulent years and was killed in a car wreck. So she was killed in a car wreck in her late 20s. And by the time you get even to the end of that first paragraph, as a reader, if your antennae are up, you're thinking, oh, was it an innocent car crash? This first paragraph it's masterful. In a airport thriller kind of way, it is masterfully done. And it gets better and better as it goes along. I especially noticed how much of the action, I'd completely forgotten this about Grisham, because, like I said, and I don't think I'd get much pushback from his fans. I don't think I would. I mean, our biggest fan of John Grisham on BookTube is Bill Rutenberg. I don't think he would argue with me that a lot of John Grisham's books aren't good. They're just sort of him showing up and punching a time clock. I think that's only fair because that gives due precedence, due honor to the books that do have a kind of magic. But because of that, those, a dozen or maybe 2 dozen lackluster books, I forgot how much work Grisham can do with dialogue. It's really evident in this book. It really does a lot. He is not one of the flaws of airport thrillers is that they feel like they just have to spoon feed you everything, right? Because you're not going to keep this thing, and you're not going to pay attention to it. The whole point of an airport thriller is that you're not going to pay attention to it. You're going to pay a limited amount of attention, very little bit, but you're going to need everything spoon-fed to you. I've never understood that. I really haven't. The books that are airport thrillers, popular legal thrillers, science thrillers, whatever, that don't do that, the ones that write up to you instead of down to you, are always the ones that do better. They're always the ones that become publishing phenomenon. You would think that thriller writers would notice that and never do the opposite, although maybe I'm being wishful. Maybe they just can't. Maybe they just can't do that. But think of all the examples that come to mind. What Tom Clancy novel reads anything like The Hunt for Red October? None of them do. No matter how much you might like some of them, none of them read like that. What's another good example? Well, Silence of the Lambs is a serial killer murder thing. I hesitate to say it that way because, of course, it was Red Dragon that started that whole thing. The Red Dragon and the momentum of it. But Silence of the Lambs really kicked it into mega gear. And there were a whole bunch of books like that weren't that. That weren't as good as that. And I firmly believe that if you write up to your audience, no matter where you're writing, no matter what kind of subgenre you're writing in, you'll be rewarded for it. I don't know, there are probably cases where that isn't true, but boy, oh boy, this is not one of them. I loved it. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Cannot thank the sender enough. This is a perfect condition book from 1990. When, because it doesn't have the rest of, this is not a later printing of this, is what I'm saying. I don't actually know how many later printings of this there were. And it's not a paperback, so this is going right on the shelf. I had no idea that I would like the reread as much as I did. Although, I have to say, as a sort of parting shot on the firm, that although the reread upped my estimation of the book, I've often been as guilty as anybody else of mocking this book, and particularly this author. There's nothing mockable about this. It knows exactly what it wants to be, and it does what it wants to be better than, God, you could fill a room with books like this, with legal thrillers like this, where our valorous young hero figures out what's going on at this firm. He figures out that those nefarious undertones are in fact real, and that if he doesn't play ball, he's going to end up in a pine box himself. Well, how do you get out of that situation? The feds come to him, and he has a tense encounter with one of them that is wonderfully done. I mean, it's wonderfully done in the movie as well, but even better in the book. It's longer in the book, and it's also more textured in the book. And the federal officer who is talking to Mitch McGear says, look, you can ignore this conversation and you can go back to work. You'll have great benefits. You'll have a great vacation. You'll have, a great year-end salary. You'll get all sorts of high-profile cases. But we're going to take this firm down. If it's not you who helps us to do it, it'll be somebody else. And if it's not you who helps it to do it, then you'll go down with it, because we'll come after you the way we do any of the rest of them. So that's the choice I'm offering you. You can either help for out of enlightened self-interest or not. And the whole scene, that scene, is wonderfully done. It is not spoon-feeding you anything. You have to be paying attention to it. I just loved it. I really want to thank the sender. But despite the fact that this elevated my opinion of the book, it really is a terrific thriller. It didn't change my opinion about sequels. There shouldn't be any sequels to this book. That shouldn't be true. I'd love to know what John Grisham's reasoning is. I'm sure that he's given interviews on the subject. I should look around for them. I'd love to know that. He must know that him writing 30 years ago did not conceive that this book would have a sequel. He must know that. It's clearly written that it doesn't have one. We shall see. I will give it a try. It's going to be merciless, because this book is going to be fresh in my mind and in a higher estimation than it ever was. What happens if this sequel, this Mitch McDear sequel, is a lazy John Grisham book? Oh, God, that will make it even worse. But then the other book that I got is new. It's not 30 years old. It's brand new. And it's intriguing. Very, very intriguing. Got this in the mail. This comes out on the 16th of May. It's a big, heavy thing. Is it priced accordingly? Oh, no, it's only $28. This is $30. It's a heavy thing because it's full of illustrations. This is by Brad Fox, and it's called The Bathysphere Book, Effects of the Luminous Ocean Depths. And it's here's this from Astra House. It's a heavy thing because it's got black and white period illustrations, but also reproductions. It's this bigger, heavier stock paper so that it can, I want to show you a drawing if I can, because it's got drawings in here as well. Look at that. It's got drawings, period photos, and everything, and it is, on the surface anyway, no pun intended, it's the story of 1930, of William Beebe, a naturalist named William Beebe, who went down in a bathysphere to look at deep-sea life forms. First time that any human had ever seen them and come back to tell the tale. Saw some deep-sea life forms. He drew pictures of them. I want to get, yeah, there we go. He drew pictures of them, and the illustrations are all throughout this thing. That's why it's so heavy, because it's not normal paper. The illustrations are not just in one little island in the middle. They're all through the book. But it's a weird book. I've written about William Beebe and about his Beebe and about his writing. If I can, I will try to find at least one of those essays. They're from 10 or 15 years ago. They were quite long and quite interesting, I think. He's a fascinating figure, absolutely fascinating. And his books are worth getting. He wrote a lot of them. He's come up a couple of times on this channel, I think. But this isn't just that story. The chapters in here are almost poetic meditations on, I wonder if I can show you orthographically. Well, no, not really. It's not really going to be able to do it. But it's weird. It's a weird thing. It reminded me of that book we saw a few weeks ago called The Forest. Another natural history sort of pondering that isn't a straightforward history. William Beebe needs a biography, very much so a straightforward biography. He hasn't had one in forever. But this isn't that. This is more of a poetic prose meditation on the sea depths and on the risks of the bathysphere. And I wonder if I have an example. Okay, let me give you an example here. First of all, this is an example. Tiny little chapters like this. That's a whole section of the book. Let me read you an example of what I'm talking about. Beebe had imagined a last chapter of Half Mile Down. That's the book he wrote about being in the bathysphere, called If I Come Up. That was his original idea for the final chapter of the book. A contemplation, no doubt, of the possibility of dying in the deep. Over the course of the bathysphere dives, there had been leaks, broken windows, oxygen shortages, tangled cable. It was not unreasonable to contemplate that one misfortune too many might lead to his annihilation. Beads of water like lead pellets tearing his body apart, shards of shattered quartz glass flying into his eyeball, the steel sphere crumpling under pressure, and him falling to the ocean floor in an eternal embrace with Barton, that's his partner, that unlovable colleague whose puke he had lived with during the engineer's bouts of seasickness. He must have imagined the absurdity of an eternal Bartonian embrace. It might have scared him more than the bullets of water and the shards of quartz, certainly more than the sharks and squids. He left no explanation why he changed his mind, but the chapter was never written. See what I mean? That isn't straightforward narrative of history or natural history. And the book is full of that. The book is all like that. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I intend to read it again before I attempt to review it. God knows who this would be for. Maybe a natural history fan, certainly. If you have a natural history fan, especially one who's prone to be encountered simply staring off into the distance and you have to call them back to reality, they might love this thing because it's not dry at all. It's beautifully, beautifully done. So there you go. An odd video. I don't know what this is. I never know what half my videos are. There's 2 books. One old, one new. Both of them arrived here recently, and I had a blast with both of them. So that's all that I need. That's all the reason that I need to make a bookish video. But I'll wrap this up now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.